it's helpful to know what your competitors are doing today, but I think it's even more important to know what they're doing next. We've been saying for a while, hey, Dominion's telling the story that we're running out of power. We've got some transmission lines to build, but we've also got to figure out the generation side.
All right, welcome to another edition of Not Your Father's Data Center. I am Raymond Hawkins, Chief Revenue Officer at Compass, and today our friends at datacenterHawk are joining us, and today in the person of Ed. You're going to tell me how to pronounce it because I don't want to butcher it. Tell me how to say your last name properly, Ed.
Yeah, it's Socia.
Socia. All
That's right.
Just like the catcher for the Mets. I hate it, but that's probably the best reference I can give. Or Mets and Dodgers. Did you play with the Dodgers too? Yeah,
I think so. I know Mets for sure. I grew up in a Yankees household.
So yeah, you're definitely not. That's not ringing a bell for you.
That was the comparison I always got. So you run out of money.
Insight Director in North America for datacenterHawk. You got to tell us what that means first, and then we're going to dig into who you are.
Yeah, Raymond. So I'm a storyteller, and a lot of my friends would hear that and laugh, and they'd say, "You sure are." But it's basically my role is
especially about your fishing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I got it.
But it's kind of my role is to have these conversations with folks in the market and figure out what's going on, and take all these little sound bites and put them into this story that we can tell. Aside from the metrics and the charts and the graphs and the statistics and all that good stuff, but more important than the what is the why. Why are people going to certain markets? Power challenges are tough, but what does that mean? And why is this what everybody's speaking about now? So,
yeah. Well, before we get into the data center business, let's learn a little bit about you. You do not sound like you're from South Texas, so get back up to where you're from, and kind of weave a path that leads us to Rhett and David's door. How did you get to datacenterHawk?
Yeah, so I grew up in Syracuse, New York. Go Orange.
Big Orange.
Yeah.
Bayheim and Earl the Pearl. And
yep, that's right.
See if I can make any other. Yeah.
We had McDad back in the day.
Lake Effect Snow. Lake Effect Snow. You guys are kind of known for that.
Yep. So grew up in Syracuse. Went to parochial school there, went to Catholic school, and after graduation, I went up to Burlington, Vermont. Attended the University of Vermont. And I have a degree in community development with a focus on sustainability.
You can't let a Catamounts shout out go by. Come on, let's go Catamounts.
Go Catamounts.
Catamounts, that's right.
I'm proud of my school. I'm athletically, I identify as an Orangeman.
That's good. That's good. You're allowed to do that these days.
But yeah, so I went to UVM with this idea in mind to study sustainability, and
that's before Orange Man became a political term.
Yeah,
right. That's right. Some people don't know that's the Syracuse mascot, not
and they had to drop
not a presidential candidate.
Now they're just the Orange because they had I think Lady Orangeman sounded kind of funny. Which my mascot in high school were the brothers because it was a LaSallian school, so the Lady Brothers sounded even funnier. So
even a little clunkier.
Yeah, so I went up there and studied sustainability, which in the mid 2000s, sustainability was like a hippie term, and everybody's saying, you just want to go around and be Johnny Appleseed and plant trees, and I said, no, this is really the future. We're moving in this direction, and cut to 15 years later, sustainability. I'm seeing on LinkedIn all the time, people, sustainability officers, and the ESG buzz came around. So lived in Burlington for a long time, and I graduated, and I came out here where I am now to Denver, Colorado.
All right, so one set of mountains to another.
Yeah, these mountains are a little bigger out here.
Bigger out there in Denver.
Yeah, but I basically came out. I just loved Colorado, and Syracuse has about 65 days of sun a year and 300 days of overcast, and Colorado's the exact opposite. So,
yeah.
So that was a no-brainer. And then I'm a big music fan. My girlfriend and I see a ton of live music. We're about 15 minutes from Red Rocks. It's a great place to be. And so when I got out here, I started I got an internship at this company that has since been acquired. At the time, it was called Energy Acuity. And it was basically what we do at datacenterHawk, the market intelligence side of, the business, but it wasn't data center specific. It was power generation and delivery specific.
Is that what took you to Denver, going to work for Energy Acuity?
No, I came to Denver I sold my Jeep Got about $2,000 in cash in my pocket and packed a backpack and headed out. Slept on some couches. This is, I think I was like 21 at the time.
Yeah. Went back when all that was fun.
Back when all that was fun, and I'm sure some of my friends would say I slept on their couches a little longer than they wanted me to, but I got an internship at that company and kind of climbed my way up. And by the end I was there for about 8 or 9 years, and at the end of that, I was managing the entire research platform for the renewables piece. So that was really fun, and I got my feet underneath me with basically just the American electric grid and different regulatory bodies like FERC versus, different independent system operators and how it's a really complex system, and the generation side and the delivery side, things like that, the policy side. So then, when I decided to kind of move, and it was a small company, but they were later acquired by a massive company called Inveris. So it's a great company. I kind of said, hey, well, what's the next step? And I had some close friends and some family members that had been in telco and data center space. And they were like, hey, this is a really interesting time. So cut to, I applied, at CBRE to be their director of research for North America. And when I'm talking to my former fearless leader, Mr. Pat Lynch, we're talking about, what are your strengths? And I said, I have a proficiency in research and all this stuff. And I have this really, robust understanding of the power markets and power policy and things like that. Candidly, I have some stuff to learn on data centers. And Pat said, well, that's great, Ed. He said, you're surrounded by people who know data centers. What we don't have is people who know power.
Ed, help me out.
Yeah.
What year is this? You're in Denver, which is where Pat is.
Yep.
You get connected to CBRE. What year are you and he first talking?
So I'll tell you the exact date. And it was March 13th, 2020, which was the first day.
Oh, wow. Recent.
It was the first day of the pandemic. So I got an email after quitting a job that I'd been at for, the better part of a decade.
Yeah. Hey, by the world's going to shut down today. Great job.
Yeah.
Good timing.
Well, so I got a call, or I got an email first, and it was like, hey, we're going to the office. I was supposed to start on Monday, which is the 16th of March. And I get an email. It's like, hey, we're going to close the office on Monday. Just hold tight. We need to figure out this coronavirus thing. So I'm like, okay.
Boy, there's the understatement of all time.
A day turned into, and I'm working out of my Gmail. I'm working from like a little, I was in Capitol Hill. So there's riots going on outside of my window. It's like, it was a really, really, it's kind of it was a wild time. It was a crazy time, but
interesting time.
It was very interesting times. And, that week turned into a month, that month turned into like 6 months, that 6 months turned into over a year. And the whole time, basically I'm just thinking like, what the hell is this? Is this the new, is this the new normal? I guess the benefit of all of that is when everything else in our economy and all of the, you talk about REITs and you talk about, especially with commercial real estate, and you talk about different verticals or different asset classes, data centers, people were like, man, you landed in it right at the right time, because data centers were, responding. I mean, everybody felt the squeeze, but data centers were really, with the dispersed workforce, with, people going to this sort of hybrid remote setup. The statistic I always used to throw out was Zoom in the beginning of March of 2020 went from like 30 million calls a day. By the end of March, it was up to like 300 million. And then by the end of April, it was up to like over 400 million Zoom calls a day. And, I'm learning about this digital infrastructure at the time, and that everything has to traverse this physical fiber, to get from point A to point B. So, it's while all this is going on, at least everyone's patting me on the back going, man, you've really accepted it in a good way. So,
yeah. So we're taking the sustainability researcher and we're teaching you about IP packets.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're saying this stuff bounces around, and amazingly, video packets are really, really big and lots of work. And yeah, all right, boy, as if our industry had been growing for, almost 2 decades at that point. And it didn't need gasoline thrown on the fire, but boy, and that's one of the things. I know the pandemic was a horrible experience for mankind and a horrible experience for our planet, but man, it did have an unbelievable, I heard somebody fairly early, it was in that first summer, so June or July of 20, say that we've had 3 years of digital transformation in the last 3 months. And I think it forced organizations to go, hey, how do I do this differently? And I know you used the metric for Zoom. Certainly it changed the way, everybody communicated and had meetings and where they sat. but that forced a lot of change on the back end,
Mm.
right? You alluded to networks, and of course, then there's got to be data centers and servers and all of that. So our industry got a huge boost from the need to be able to do things remotely. And then I've heard something lately about, I'm not sure I'm gonna spell it right. I think it's AI, something like that. I'm not 100% sure, but
Sure.
I hear it's doing something too to our industry. And GPUs, I think, I'm not sure, but seems to also be providing another accelerant to what was already a pretty well performing market. So all right, so you go work with Pat Lynch, who we think the world of at CBRE,
Yeah,
in early
likewise.
2000. You're basically a researcher with a sustainability environmental background, and you get dropped in the middle of the best data center team
Yeah.
in the brokerage world, right? I mean, I think that's
Yeah,
fair, right?
I would say
I
it's
think they're the
fair.
biggest.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, on top of that, now everything's going to go gangbusters because we just lit a powder keg because everybody's got to do this thing from home. All right, we're caught up. Keep going. What goes on from 2000
Yeah, so
and 20? Excuse me.
yeah, I kept going on CBRE, and I still to this day I love CBRE. I love the Green Machine. I grew a lot there, and I have a nothing but respect for that company. I dipped my toes in the world of brokerage for a little while, and I realized that I really do like the research piece, versus your sales piece. So I kind of said, hey, how do I downsize a little bit in terms of company, because I'm a very social person. I like to know everybody that I work with, and there's 140, 150,000 people in CDRE. I know a lot of people. I don't know that many people.
It's a tall ask.
It's a tall ask. I think if anybody could do it, me. But anyway, so then basically took a sabbatical for a couple months and got outside and was hiking in the beautiful Front Range of Colorado, and basically reached out to Mike Netzer, who you've spoken with before at datacenterHawk.
Yeah.
And Mike kind of laughed, and he was like, Ed, I'm going to send you an email, or I'm going to have, David send you an email. And it turned out, I would basically said, hey, I took some downtime, I'm throwing my hat back in the ring. Just let me know if anything comes up. And unbeknownst to me, they'd been looking for a director for North America. So, I talked to them about it. We chatted. It seemed like a great fit. That was back in, August of last year, I think. So I'm still a little under a year at datacenterHawk.
All
But
right.
it's been great, flying around, and David and I really hit it off. He's just like Pat Lynch. I mean, he's second to none when it comes to being a leader.
Good human being.
These guys in the leadership positions, they lead by example, and both Pat and David did that. There's no call they wouldn't get on. There's no, they wouldn't send you into battle if they themselves weren't going in with you. And I don't know, I find that to be a very admirable quality from a leadership standpoint.
Yeah, here. Well, I will just say, at Compass, we are friends of the program. We're big Dave Liggett fans. We love him and have known him a long, long time, and the Liggett family, which we'll talk about another time, and think the world of him as well. So okay, so you meet Netzer, and he says, we're looking for somebody in North America, and then you meet Liggett, and it sounds like it's a thing, and you've been there a year, and I know you gave us a little bit at the top, but Insight Director, what's the real mission?
The real mission is just telling the story of what's going on and where the ball is moving. And it's helpful to know what your competitors are doing today, but I think it's even more important to know what they're doing next. So when you can find these trends and you can kind of identify, hey, why is everybody moving south down the I-95 corridor when Loudoun County's, a massively core Ashford's massively developed, again, second to none in terms of fiber connectivity. And then everything kind of sprawled over to Prince William County and Manassas. And, you can look at land pricing out there. And we've been saying for a while, hey, Dominion's telling the story that we're running out of power. We've got some transmission lines to build, but we've also got to figure out, the generation side. So we're thinking, okay, well, then there's Novak territory. There's all these other regions. So when you start to look at this stuff, and then you start to track the providers that are buying the parcels, or, they're doing their site selection, and you start to say, okay, Spotsylvania, Lockyer, Culpeper, and you see this trend that we had kind of been talking about for a while. You guys have that incredible data center in Red Oak. We said the same thing in Dallas. Stuff's moving south in Dallas on the I-35 corridor, going towards Austin, and alternatively coming up from Austin, Lancaster and Red Oak. And what Compass is doing is a great example of that. So yeah, just taking those bits and pieces and figuring out, hey, what does this mean? What's the story? And then I get on camera with gentlemen such as yourself and talk about it.
And if you'd have put your chips on Lancaster, Texas in 2020 as being a data center market, that'd have been some real insight.
Hey, David might have done it.
He might have called out Lancaster. In fairness, yeah, south of town in Dallas certainly became a thing. If you go back 5 years, no one was talking about it. But 3 years ago, it really became a thing. And boy, now it's just gangbusters. So I know we can talk about South Dallas because it's headquarters for both of us. Let's talk a little bit about what you see in those markets that are going gangbusters. You mentioned going down Prince William County, down I-95. What with your energy background, what do you think is leading us to where the industry is going? I know I joked about AI, but certainly it's changed the size of what we talk about with people. It's changed the pace of what we talk about. And I also think it's changed the location. So take any one of those three you want to take.
I think the important thing to note is when we used to, and it was almost before I even got into the space, that people would talk about markets as tiers, a tier 1 market, a tier 2 market. I was sort of introduced to them through the lens of primaries, secondaries, tertiaries. What we've seen recently is sort of I don't know if I'd call it a flight, but a migration from these more established markets to essentially non-markets. Think rural Ohio, south of Sandusky, things like that. And it's all driven by that availability to acquire power sooner or later and then scale that power, with your growing requirement. A lot of these providers are sort of kind of hedging their bets and they're deploying multiple markets at the same time. But, if you need to be in a market, if you have a latency sensitive requirement or your end user, I should say, has a latency sensitive requirement, you need to be in that core market. But if you have, and if you want to go back to our alphabet soup, if you want to go from like the AI and even the pre-AI stuff, the machine learning stuff, it's not latency agnostic. Some of it is, and then some of it is latency sensitive, I guess I would say. So I think we're starting to see folks say, hey, while we're waiting for these will serve letters, while we're waiting for these load letters from utilities who, are giving us a 2, 3, 4 year out, estimated delivery date, where can we go now? How can we build speculatively or building for a client? How can we do that today in markets that we have power today? And do they have applications or do they have requirements that, would work in those more, remote locations? So I think, we're seeing, we're still seeing folks building in Loudoun County. We're still seeing folks building in Prince William County and all down that I-95 corridor. We're still seeing folks build in Hillsborough, but all these markets are power constrained. And so while they're building in these markets, they're trying to say, hey, where's the power today?
Yeah. And where's the power today, to your point, you already talked a little bit about in Loudoun County, the issues there with Dominion. It ain't in those markets anymore, at least not at the scale people need it. Right. And because of that, we don't want to call them tier 1s and 2s anymore because, looking in Wyoming or Reno or Iowa or Alabama for hundreds of megawatts, that's no longer size-wise a tier 2 thing, but you're going there because you can get power, right? And you see people in our industry doing that. It's just, it's surprising the where getting, originally driven by network. And now more than anything, it feels like it's being driven by power.
Yeah. And I would say, I think people are a bit more or a bit less rather beholden to the energy or the fuel mixes of regions now. Like we used to see people go to areas because, hey, this place has, a plethora of wind or, maybe it's even large. Hydro Quebec up in Montreal, large hydro. Yeah. But now, if you're talking about a gigawatt, 2 gigawatt deployment, you're basically saying, hey, who's got 2 gigawatts to sell us? And you're kind of saying, we might have to put this ESG thing, we might have to put these renewable portfolio standards, we might have to stretch that target date out a little farther than we had initially intended because of this AI thing. You're not going to find multi-gigawatt PPAs with straight wind energy in middle America unless
not a thing.
It's not a thing unless you're building your own wind farms, which, I know AWS and companies like that have certainly done. Or they're saying, let's go behind the meter and, look at the Susquehanna deal at the nuke facility. But that's obviously kind of I guess I'd call it test case.
It's a unique
Yes.
situation, but I do think it speaks to where the future is
Yeah.
going, right? To be able to do the amount of energy we're going to need at scale and neutral in a carbon world. I personally think that's the direction we're headed, is that you're going to see more deals get done. You know, we're going to have to fix the regulatory side of it, because we can't wait 10 years to get a
Yeah.
plant online.
And I think that's what it is. I think that's what it is about a decade out. I would say the SMR, SMB, whatever you want to call them, the nuclear story. But, I say this all the time. The United States military and the United States government has hundreds of thousands of these things cruising around the oceans on submarines with no detriment to the servicemen
doing it a
aboard.
Yeah.
So they've been doing it a long time. So I think it's certainly where the market is going. I do think we're probably 8 to 12 years out from that being like a commonly adopted sort of power generation source.
All right, Ed. So I got to challenge you on that one. Why do you think it's that far? Because, right, we've seen Microsoft announce a project with it. We've seen the AWS Susquehanna deal. So clearly the biggest guys who move our market are already making public announcements about it. I'd love to hear your take as an energy guy, why you still think it's that far.
Aside from power availability, one of the biggest threats to data center development is the NIMBYs, right? And so a lot of these folks who they hear nuclear and they think Fukushima, they think Chernobyl, they think, they just absolutely assume the worst. So they're going to push back on nuclear as a generating source. If you go to Europe, they're huge on nukes. I think it will be adopted, and there could be the Susquehanna thing. That facility was there. Microsoft has been talking about this for a while. When it comes to nukes as the preferred power source for, future data centers, I just think the proliferation of that technology, it's going to require regulatory bodies chiming in on that. It's going to require a ton of capital to develop these things. And then you're going to have to, like I said, you're going to have to get the communities on board. So maybe it's going to be shorter than that. I would imagine, and from a lot of my conversations, a decade is the sweet spot that I've been hearing. That doesn't mean that some will pop up before that, but I think in terms of being like pretty readily adopted or widely adopted.
Yeah. Well, Ed, when you qualify it with the go-to standard of power for a data center, that's probably right. Before it's the main street way we do things is probably a decade. I think we will see projects before that. To your point, Susquehanna was already there. I think we're going to see, this is one guy who has nowhere near the energy education you do. I think we're going to see strain on the generation side. I mean, we already see strain on the distribution side, but I think we're going to see, and transmission side, more than anything. I think we're going to see strain on the generation side across the energy portfolio, not just for data centers. We take big bites at one time, so we get noticed. And I think the data center and tech companies are going to go, hey, there's a great way to fix this. If you give us regulatory approval to do this, 2 gigawatt generation thing with a nuclear reactor, hey, we can give you all, we don't need to take anything off the grid. I don't know how it's going to play out, but I can see that, right? When I think about who has enough money to lobby the regulators and the legislators to say, hey, I know it's 15 years from day one to commission a nuclear plant, but hey, I could take 2 gigawatts off the grid if you give me a 5-year plan. That's kind of how I think it gets done, is as a way to relieve pressure from the grid.
And I totally agree. I think right now, today, it's both a generation and a transmission distribution issue, but it's more, the delays are more heavily on the transmission distribution. I mean, look at, again, the Dominion territory and that transmission line they're building out. But when you talk about, when you look at the future growth of data centers, and we were talking about it, 14 gigawatts in a year or something, or more than whatever it is now. I mean, that's egregious, has a pejorative connotation to it, but that's an egregious amount of power. And I think Dominion's doing something like a 2.4, 2.5 gig offshore wind farm. And I was asked by a data center provider, is this going to solve our problems? And I was like, no, it's not even 3 gigs. Look at what's in the pipeline just for Northern Virginia. So they're going to have to figure that out. I think that they will. I guess Dominion has been thoughtful, and they've done it well with, coupling this up with the Loudoun County Economic Development Board, Buddy Reiser in the late 90s, mid 2000s. They really understood what it takes to...
The great Buddy Reiser, I have to add that. Because he'll listen and he'll call me on it if I don't say it. So,
But, they basically figured out, they said, hey, we have to be transparent with our development and what we're able to do and lead times and what it takes to get that car delivered. Now that these emerging markets or non-markets are starting to see these massive swaths of data center demand, like I don't want to call utilities out, but some of the utilities in middle America are now saying, wait a second, they bit off more than they could chew. And so now they're backtracking a little bit saying, wait a second, we got to figure this out before we just say, instead of seeing just dollar signs, we say, hey, wait a minute. One of the issues we're seeing is if a hyperscaler puts out an RFP and then 4 third-party data center guys go to a utility with that same RFP for easy conversations on 100 megawatts.
It's not 4 loads. That's right.
It's shown as 4 or 5 100 megawatts instead of 100 megawatts. So understanding what that requirement will be in the future has been obfuscated, and I think there's work to do on that side. But I totally agree. I mean, the generation thing is going to be more and more important.
All right, Ed. Energy expertise, insight director. We love David Liggett. Rhett and Mike are good guys too, but we're kind of big Dave Liggett fans. You made a good call going there. Hard to leave Pat Lynch because he's a great guy
love
too.
Love it because it's all good all the time.
Yeah. I love that you're still in the space with Pat. And when I get to Denver, I'm looking you up. We'll go hike up something.
We'll bring a beer for the top, and we'll talk about data centers after we've consumed said beer.
Sounds good. Assuming I can make it to the top. Ed, thank you so much. We've enjoyed it, and we will look forward to talking to you and other friends at Data Center Hawk again in the future. Thanks, man.
It's been great.